If you thought that we dodged a Bolshevik bullet when Bernie Sanders did not get the Democratic nomination and ultimately did not become president of the United States, wait till you find out what President Biden has in store for you. This is Beyond the Cover with your guest host again, Christian Gomez, and joining us today on the show is Senior Editor of the New American Magazine, William F. Jasper, who in the November 8th issue of the New American Magazine has an article here about Comrade Omarova. Bill Jasper, thank you for joining us today to talk about this.
Thank you, Christian. Pleasure being here.
So like I said in the intro, if you thought that we dodged the Bolshevik bullet, so to speak, by not getting Bernie Sanders as both the Democratic nominee and ultimately the president, what have we gotten with Joe Biden? I mean, is he a moderate Democrat, or have we gotten full AOC socialism, or is this worse?
Well, Christian, it's really difficult to exaggerate how radical by all appearances, Saule Omarova is, who just today, as we talked, just checked the news. I had hoped that Biden had retracted his nomination of her to be the Comptroller of the currency.
Now, what exactly is Comptroller for currency for those who are watching who may not be familiar with either her background, as you will fill us in, and this position that Biden has nominated her for?
Well, that's a good question, because most people may have heard of Comptroller of the currency, but have a very vague idea, if any at all, what it actually is. It's an office, a very important one, under the Treasury Department, which supervises banks around the country. That's banks, not just banks, but also credit unions and branch banks, and has authority to some degree over around $14 trillion in our budget. Moreover, she sits then on the FDIC, if she were to be confirmed. Saule Omarova would sit on the FDIC, the Federal Depositor Insurance Corporation, as well as some other boards within the financial architecture of our country. So it's an important position, and the point of our article was to look at, is she really the kind of person we want to be on here? Her background shows that not only was she born and raised in a communist country, Kazakhstan, under one of the most repressive of the communist dictatorships during the Soviet period, Nursultan Nazarbayev, who still remains, even though he stepped down as president. He was a Soviet dictator, but he stepped down in 2019, and he remains chairman of the country, basically, under the new president, whom he handpicked. So she was raised in that environment, she was in the Komsomol. Most Americans have forgotten about that, or if they're younger, they never heard about that. The Komsomol is the Young Communist League, which you find in every communist country, whether it's Cuba, North Korea, China, or any of the countries of the Soviet Union. And so she grew up in that and was one of the leaders of the Young Communist League.
So she wasn't just forced to participate in this like a child in the Hitler Youth that may have been forced by the state to be involved in that. In this case, she willingly was a part of it, and of her own voluntary decisions rose to a leadership position within this communist organization.
Well, yes, no, that's a fair question. Many people that grow up in a country controlled like that may be forced to join or directed to join by their parents or just by social pressures. But here's where it's important to do the proper questioning and vetting, and Comrade Omarova should not object to this, because the Young Communist League, the Komsomol, was under the direction of the Communist Party and of the KGB. And so it was not just a Boy Scout or Girl Scout program, as many people try to characterize it. It was the training ground, it was the recruitment ground for the party leaders. And according to some of the public reports that are out there, the London Daily Mail interviewed some friends of hers from that time period, and they quoted them as saying she was one of the most rigorous of the Komsomol young leaders. And she distinguished herself by being extremely energetic and fervent in her support of Marxism-Leninism. Well, that is important to take into consideration. She says now that no, she was an anti-communist, and that she and her friends in the university did everything they could to oppose communism. Well, we haven't seen any proof of that, but what we have seen, and we can go into it, are the papers that she has written now as a mature professor of law at Cornell University. She's no longer under the direction of the Komsomol leadership, at least not oppressively as she was while she was in the country. She is still espousing Marxist-Leninist dogma. A couple of her papers that we could go into, which I have read, one is called Why We Need a National Investment Authority. Now, that calls for nationalizing investment, where the government would take all of the money and invest it where it would view to be most important. That's pure Marxism. Another one of her proposals is for digitizing the currency and for having the Federal Reserve take over most of the functions of our banking system. The Federal Reserve currently already is functioning in a nascent Marxist fashion. In the article, I point out that Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, 1848, when they wrote the Communist Manifesto, laid out a 10-plank program for communism. The fifth plank called for creating a central bank that would have control of currency and credit. So that's plank number 5 of the Communist Manifesto. Omarova is calling for that in spades. In fact, she even goes further than that. So these are very, very scary issues. And the fact that she could be seriously considered for this is and to not be questioned by the media is really astounding.
In your article, you point out that Senator Pat Toomey described her as the most radical choice for any regulatory spot in our federal government that he had ever seen. Is, in your estimation, is that an exaggeration, or have there been others in the past who would fit this mold of a Soviet agent being in our government?
Well,
or a potential Soviet agent.
Right. As you well know, we have had Soviet agents very high up in our government, and they have done tremendous amount of damage. Harry Dexter White was the man in charge of the Bretton Woods agreements for Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and he was a Soviet agent, and he worked together with John Maynard Keynes to put together the Bretton Woods institutions of the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. Tremendous shift in and subversion in the American constitutional system. So he and Alger Hiss, who was top advisor to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, were the key people at the United Nations founding conference in San Francisco in 1945. So we've had, and to them you could add Solomon Adler and Virginius Frank Coe and many others, just going back to the Roosevelt-Truman era, who turned out to be Soviet agents working in our government. Now, in Omarova's case, this is all the more disturbing because she is not a Native American born here who became a communist. She's come from a communist country, and she's obviously still carrying at least some of that baggage, if not being a full controlled agent. So this is something that has to be looked at seriously. I point out in the article, look, for the last 5 years, we had this Trump-Russia collusion conspiracy theory playing by all the media every day, day in, day out, 24/7, CNN, ABC, NBC, New York Times, Washington Post was Russia, 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 Trump, Russia collusion. And that all turned out to be completely phony, completely bogus. We had House and Senate investigations, multiple House and Senate investigations. We had the Mueller investigation, the Inspector General's report, and then, of course, all of the media digging into it around the clock. Did they turn up any evidence? None. Zilch. There was nothing. So, and yet then you do the flip side of this, and here we have somebody who really deserves to be looked at seriously, and it's dismissed by virtually all of the media. In fact, most of them have taken up her standard Marxist refrain, which is what? Whenever you don't want to answer respond to the debate or the questions, you simply pull out the race card. So Omarova says that she's just being attacked because she's a woman of color, so it's misogynists and racists, and because she's an immigrant. And so it's all the bigots that are attacking her, rather than responding to the questions of the American people. And in particularly in this case, the Senate. Senator Toomey asked her to be forthcoming, asked her why she had removed from her CV at Cornell University Law website, why she had removed her paper there, which was when she was at the Lenin Moscow State University. She had written a dissertation on Marx and the economy. And he asked why that had disappeared. And he asked for a copy of it in the original Russian so he could have it translated rather than have her give a sanitized translation of it. That's a reasonable thing to ask for. And yet she has refused to provide it. And so rather than rushing knee-jerk automatically to defend her and to accuse those who are asking these legitimate questions, to accuse them of racism and bigotry, the media should be saying, okay, well, there's nothing to hide, turn it over and we'll look at it, give it a fair hearing.
I'm glad that you mentioned the former Soviet agents or communist spies that served in the Roosevelt-Truman administrations in their connections with developing the original Bretton Woods system, because now we're hearing a lot of talk about Bretton Woods 2 and sort of the next phase of global economics and merging all the economies of the world together into one world economy as a forerunner for a one world government. Do you suspect that if this woman is confirmed, that she could play a significant role in terms of a U.S. delegation in the formation of a potential Bretton Woods 2 system?
Very good question. I think that would be very likely. She has the background. She's definitely on the trajectory for doing something like that. And if she succeeds in getting approved, I think we would see her rising higher and very likely could be part of what they hope to bring about with this Bretton Woods 2 that you mentioned.
Now, with when President Trump was running for office in 2016 and of course subsequently elected, the left made a big deal, as you mentioned, about supposed or alleged collusion between Russia, mainly Putin's government, and Trump and his campaign. Of course, they've yet to discover any evidence, at least any tangible evidence, to substantiate that allegation. But when it comes to Joe Biden, he does have a track record of being more than friendly with the Soviet Union and Russia. For example, when he was vice president of the United States, he traveled with a delegation to meet with the members of the Russian Duma, including one of the leaders of the Communist Party of the Russian Federation, in which he expressed, this was covered in the Russian media, NBC, CNN never touched it, Even Fox never mentioned it. It was reported in the Russian state media there that he told one of the Communist Party leaders there in the Duma that he was hoping that their party would win in the upcoming presidential election, referring to Gennady Zyuganov, the candidate of the Communist Party of the Russian Federation. Do you see the potential of this person being being confirmed, rather, she's already been nominated, of this person's potential confirmation to such a high-level appointment in our federal government with our economy as further evidence of a Biden communist connection?
Well, it certainly supports that. I mean, this is, you asked me before if I've seen anyone more radical than her, as Senator Toomey said. Aside from those that I mentioned earlier who were confirmed Soviet agents, that means enemies, treasonous traitors, treasonous operatives within our government, I can't think of anyone that comes to mind that is this palpably suspect. And, I have been involved in for quite a few years on many of these confirmation battles and was able to play a role during the Clinton administration, for instance, in stopping the nominations, the confirmations of Anthony Lake and Morton Halperin, who were both slated to high national security posts by the Clinton administration. We exposed their leftist, Marxist, communist backgrounds in the New American, and that helped to torpedo their move on up into the national security structure. But Omarova is takes us into a whole new category because of her Young Communist League background and so much of her backstory that we really don't know about yet. So,
well, I guess we'll have to confirm her to know more about her.
Yes, well, that's the Pelosi style, but it's going to be a tight race here. It's 50-50. If Manchin or Sinema or somebody else defects, then there's no chance of her getting through. So,
or potential Senator Lisa Murkowski, I'm not sure how she stands on this person's confirmation.
Well, that's just it. We have some Republicans, quite a few Republicans who are a bit in the iffy category, and I'm not aware that McConnell has taken a strong stand on this. So, which is very telling. We should be having more Republican leadership in the Senate weighing in on this and demanding to know more.
Now, in other issues of the New American, you have previously covered Biden and the Great Reset and Biden's ties with the Council on Foreign Relations. In fact, you wrote about how in the Wall Street Journal, Joe Biden wrote an article back in, say, 1992, around then, about how he learned to love the New World Order. And you've, of course, written extensively, Mr. Jasper, about the New World Order. Now, for those that are watching, could you just briefly explain what the New World Order is in terms of the convergence of East and West, and how the nomination of this person kind of just fits in perfectly with what you've been writing about for 20-plus years now?
Well, yes. So most Americans are not really familiar, except maybe in just the last year or two, with this whole expression of a new world order. And in fact, in the left-wing mainstream media, they like to chuckle and make fun of anyone that mentions new world order. Oh, these people see some crazy world conspiracy. But the term new world order is not one which we invented. The term New World Order has been used by all of the leaders of the Council on Foreign Relations, which is the main organization for the past century. The Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, has been around for a century now. They are the ones who have promoted this whole idea of a new world order in their writings, in their speeches, in their articles, in their books. They have whole books with that title, in which they lay out the plan for a world government, which they call a new world order, which would be a world government that would bring the economies and the societies, culturally, politically, socially, all the world together under a world government. And for the past several decades, the drumbeat for this has been growing bigger, particularly after the founding of the United Nations in 1945. Excuse me. And so the plans for the New World Order, as laid out by the Council on Foreign Relations and their many think tanks and members, has been that we have to knit together all of the countries of the world. We call it convergence, and that means converging also the communist countries, China, Russia, and into the world order, so that we can be fully joined and that we can be under then one rule of the world government. Now, for a long time, there were denials that there was anything going along these lines. However, starting several years ago, we began seeing every year an annual World Government Summit. They actually called it a World Government Summit. We've been covering it in the New American Magazine with the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, most of the leading countries of the world, most of the leading UN agencies. And they hold it every year. And we report on it, but almost nobody else does. You can go to the World Government Summit website, and you can see that, yes, indeed, they are pushing for creating this world government. And the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, is one of the leading forces for this. That's, Davos, the World Economic Forum, where the global elite, the billionaires of the world, fly in every year on their private jets and come on their big yachts and hold forth and tell the rest of us what we must do to reduce our standards of living. And then they have proceeded to bring forth 2 years ago in 2020 this whole plan called the Great Reset, which is to reset the whole world, and economically, politically, socially, spiritually, morally, and bring it together in a world government. So, I mean, we are proceeding along those paths. And when you see a convergence of East and West, of the communist and non-communist worlds, you're going to need to have a lot of apparatchiks like Saule Omarova to make those things fit together. So thus we have seen in the past several years many different communist Chinese coming over here to the United States, being placed in many of our top universities and our think tanks, in our governments, and the knitting together of the elites of the communist world and the non-communist world, but all working together toward this great reset.
So, Bill, you've written this extensive, well-researched article exposing Omarova. What do you suggest that people do with this article after they read it in terms of potentially stopping or derailing her nomination or confirmation, rather, in the Senate?
Well, we don't know how much time we have. We don't know when that vote could come up. It could come up very soon. So we may have hours, we may have days, we may have a couple of weeks, depending on how much heat we generate on our senators. So we should be contacting both of our United States senators. We can put the Senate office number on there, and then they can call there and ask them to be transferred to their senators. We have to let them know, email them, text them, let them know that you want them to vote against this. We don't need someone like this in there right now.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again so much for your time, Mr. Jasper. Of course, we recommend everyone get the November 8th issue of the New American Magazine again and read the article here, Comrade Omarova, Biden's Soviet-born pick for Comptroller of the Currency. Thank you again. Take care, and God bless you.